Okay, think about this for a second. You pour everything you have into something creative, right? Your heart, your soul, and then boom, it's out there for everyone to judge. How does that pressure, maybe bad reviews or just silence,
Yeah.
how does that ripple through your life, even your relationships? So today we're doing a deep dive into exactly that scenario, looking at recent reports about pop superstar Katy Perry.
Yeah.
We're talking her new album, 143, her big global tour, and how all this professional stuff has reportedly caused some stress with her fiancé, Orlando Bloom. Our mission here is really to unpack what the sources are telling us about these dynamics, how that public career pressure really hits home.
Yeah, it's a fascinating situation, isn't it? Because we're looking right at that intersection of, well, super public jobs, the need for creative validation, which is so human, and then what it takes for a partnership to actually withstand all that. It gives us a real window, I think, into managing all that external noise while trying to keep things solid internally.
Right, so let's set the scene first. Katy Perry's latest project's the album 143, the Lifetime's World Tour. What's the initial picture here? What was her vision?
Well, the album title, 143, that's pretty interesting straight away. It's that old pager code for I love you. Kind of tells you the vibe she was going for. She actually described it as, let me see, a bold, exuberant, celebratory dance pop album. And that number, 143, that feeling of love, was meant to be the core message running through it.
Okay, celebratory love.
Yeah.
Sounds positive.
Yeah, and she linked it to a big life shift, becoming a mother. She said she really tapped into that feminine, divine energy, and that led to these celebratory messages, specifically about love.
Yeah.
And then the Lifetimes tour kicked off in April 2025 to support all this new music.
Sounds deeply personal then. But the sources we looked at suggest things didn't go quite as smoothly right after the album dropped in September. What's the conflict there?
Exactly. This is where we start seeing some friction. According to one source, Katy was apparently deeply frustrated with how the album 143 was received, and that made her very stressed. Plus, there was disappointment reportedly with some of the tour reviews, too.
Okay.
And the reports explicitly say these stresses did cause some tension in her relationship with Orlando Bloom. It's easy to say, oh, work stress affecting home life, but for someone like Katy Perry, her work is so public, so tied to her identity, a bad reception isn't just like a bad day at the office.
Right, it can feel incredibly personal, I imagine.
Yeah, like a personal rejection almost, which makes that link to her private life, her relationship, really direct and, well, powerful.
That makes sense. But here's where it gets interesting, right? Because despite those reports of negative reviews causing stress, the sources also paint a different picture about the tour itself. What was actually happening on the ground?
Yes, absolutely. That's a crucial nuance. Despite what the sources called previous negative reviews causing that initial stress, the tour itself seems to have been a pretty big international success.
Like how? Any specifics?
For sure. It apparently sold out 3 nights in Mexico City. So much so she added an extra date there. And right now, the Australian leg is also described as completely sold out. Next stop is the U.S., starting in Denver on July 10th.
So there's a disconnect there between maybe some critics or initial buzz and how audiences were actually responding.
Seems like it. It suggests the reality of the tour's success might be different from some of the early narratives that reportedly caused her stress.
Okay, and this is really key. How did Orlando Bloom fit into this? When she was feeling that stress from the reception, what did the sources say about his reaction?
Well, that's where a second source adds a really important piece of the puzzle. It offers a bit of balance to that whole tension narrative. This source specifically said Orlando was understanding, and crucially, that he was there for her.
Okay, so understanding and present.
Exactly. So yes, stress might have caused some tension, but the picture also includes significant support within the relationship. It shows how they were, navigating it together. It wasn't just pressure, it was also how they responded to that pressure.
That's such an important detail, isn't it? Because you often just hear about the conflict in these situations. The fact that support was highlighted, it says something about their foundation, perhaps.
Yeah.
So, given all that scrutiny, how does someone like Katy Perry manage it? The criticism, the public judgment. She's actually spoken about this, hasn't she? What's her philosophy?
She has, and it gets to a core question, really. How do you handle that intense spotlight? Perry talked to People magazine back in February 2025, specifically about the 143 criticism. Her take was, you shouldn't read it when it's good, you shouldn't read it when it's bad. Simple, but hard to do, I bet.
Easier said than done, for sure.
Right. And then she shared this piece of advice from her therapist, which she said really changed my life.
Which was?
What anybody thinks about you is none of your business. It's what you think about yourself.
Wow. None of your business. That's quite a powerful way to frame it. Almost like building a wall against external opinion.
Or maybe reinforcing your own internal foundation. It's about where you place the control, right? Inside yourself, not with, anonymous commenters online. And you definitely see this philosophy playing out in her actions.
How so?
Well, remember the opening night of the Lifetimes tour in Mexico City? She apparently asked the crowd, point blank, has anyone ever called your dreams crazy? Seems like a pretty direct nod to dealing with doubters.
Yeah, addressing it head on.
And then there was that Instagram post on April 29th. It was quite detailed. She wrote about when the online world tries to make me a human piñata, saying she takes it with grace and sends love. She added, because I know so many people are hurting, and the internet is very much so a dumping ground for unhinged and unhealed. That really lays out her approach.
Taking the high road, essentially, while acknowledging the negativity, often comes from other people's pain. And this isn't exactly new for her, dealing with public scrutiny. The sources mentioned that Blue Origin spaceflight she did with Jeff Bezos. That got criticism, too, about the cost, the environment.
Right, and that was less than a month before she launched this huge world tour. So it does suggest a pattern, a history of navigating these kinds of public storms with a particular mindset she's described.
Okay, just so everyone has the full picture on their relationship timeline, Katy Perry's 40, Orlando Bloom is 48. They've been together quite a while now, nearly a decade. Got engaged back in February 2019, and their daughter, Daisy Dove, was born in August 2020.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a long-term established partnership we're talking about.
And that context is important because the key insight from the sources about their dynamic now is that despite the album and tour reception stress, Bloom was described as understanding and there for her. It really underscores how vital that mutual support is, especially when you're living under that kind of intense pressure. It shows that even if there's tension, a strong connection can act as a buffer, a source of resilience.
Absolutely. So when we step back from this specific story, what's the bigger takeaway here? This deep dive, it's not just celebrity gossip, right? It feels like a really clear example of something pretty universal. Putting your work out there, wanting validation, facing criticism, and seeing how all of that tests your closest relationships. It's a reminder, I think, that whether you're a global superstar or not, these challenges around creativity, public perception, and personal connection are just deeply human and tangled together.
Yeah, profoundly intertwined. And maybe it leaves us and you listening with a final thought to chew on. In this world we live in now, just saturated with opinions, constant feedback coming at you, how do you hold onto your own sense of worth? Especially if something you've made, something you care about, is put out there for judgment. How do you tell the difference between useful feedback and just noise? And maybe most importantly, what role do your own relationships, your own support systems play in keeping you grounded through all of that?